What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a movie that I'm very late to the game in seeing, but I was excited to see it nonetheless. If you hadn't seen, a few weeks ago, I released my review for Les Mis, which was obviously me talking about a personal favorite. And as I disclosed in that video, I'm a huge fan of musical theater. I have been since I was a really young kid going into high school. I've always really appreciated the art of musical theater. There's something that is just so incredible about it because comparatively to narrative film, where you can stop and do different takes, when you're performing live, you can't stop and start over again. You have to continuously perform. You have to do it at the highest possible level. And I'm always super impressed by that. And I'm always interested when stage performances are turned into major motion pictures. And like I said in Les Mis, sometimes it works really well. And then there's other instances. I know it was not regarded very well, the Mean Girls musical at the beginning of the year. So I think it's interesting. It's all about the approach and how you want to translate it from stage to screen. And I have seen Wicked probably 6 times, between seeing it on Broadway in New York City, seeing it at off Broadway when it comes around where I live, and it's always been one of my favorite musicals. I love it very dearly. I think that the message that it holds is incredibly beautiful, and I think that it's some of the best music in a modern day musical. It's just incredible. The songs are so catchy, and I've been really looking forward to seeing how they would translate that show to screen, and I'm really excited to talk about Wicked with you today. Wicked is directed by Jon M. When ostracized and misunderstood, green-skinned Elphaba is forced to share a room with the popular aristocrat Galinda, the two's unlikely friendship is tested as they begin to fulfill their respective destinies as Glinda the Good Witch and the Wicked Witch of the West. So, as I said, I was very excited to see this. Cautiously optimistic is probably the right phrasing, because whenever they translate something that you love to screen, you always want it to be great, but you never know what the end result is going to be. And I am happy to say this is one of my favorite things that I've watched all year long. I think this is about as damn near perfect of an adaptation that you could possibly ask for. And while I have a few little critiques about some lighting and cinematographical choices, I feel like they're incredibly minor in comparison to the overall product that you get, because this thing is almost 3 hours long. It's only really the first act of the musical. This is a part 1 of a 2-part series, but they nail it. They hit every emotional beat perfectly. I feel like the moments that they add in the film really just make the world feel more immersive and engaging, and I'm excited to talk about it a little bit with you today. So at the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to Elphaba, played by Cynthia Erivo, and we learn early on in the film that after she was born, her father grows an enormous disdain for her because she's green and she's different, and she's treated horribly by people around her. We see scenes of her throughout her childhood with her sister Nessa Rose, who is bound to a wheelchair, but people seem to love her so much more. She is considered the normal child in the family, and it seems like Elphaba is constantly just pushed off to the side. No one really cares about her, and so she's trapped in her own world. And eventually we see her grow up, and her sister is about to go off to school at Shiz University. And she goes to the school, and when she gets there, her father says, "Hey, I need you to watch over her until she gets settled in her room, make sure that she's all taken care of." She goes to this big meeting led by Madame Morrible, played by Michelle Yeoh, who is the headmaster of Shiz University, and while they're there, Elphaba ends up using her magic, and Madame Morrible immediately wants to take her under her wing, wants her to come to this school. Elphaba initially says, "Hey, I'm not supposed to be here, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing," but Madame Morrible essentially forces her to stay there, and so she reluctantly agrees and hopes that maybe she'll be able to learn more about her powers and maybe eventually see the wizard. Well, at the same time, we are introduced to Glinda, or Galinda, played by Ariana Grande, who is clearly the super popular, everyone in the school loves her, and the two of them are forced to share a room together at school. And the entirety of the film is watching the relationship between these two characters, learning more about Elphaba and the powers that she has. When she is eventually invited to go see the Wizard of Oz, what he will tell her about her powers and who she will eventually become. So like I said, this movie is fantastic for a multitude of reasons, and I have to start with the big big positive, which is the incredible performances in this movie. Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba is absolutely incredible. From start to finish in this movie, not only does she have an incredible singing voice, but she brings so much personality to this character. I've loved the Broadway musical. As I've said, I've seen it like 5 or 6 times. I feel like I always get a lot out of it, but I really enjoyed the characterization of Elphaba in this iteration. I feel like they add more to her character. There are a lot of really special scenes in the movie that I feel like just give even more context to who she is. And I think without Cynthia Erivo's brilliant performance, it probably wouldn't be the same. I also think with the messaging of what Wicked is all about, I think it's so incredibly cool to have a person of color play Elphaba. I feel like it just brings so much more of a punch to the screen, and really having a person who, you know, there's a lot of symbolism for the way marginalized groups are treated in Wicked, and I think that having a person that is a part of a marginalized group play that character really helps the emotional message of the film to hit even harder. And I was just blown away by Cynthia's performance. I know she has previous Broadway experience. She was in The Color Purple. She's done a lot of really great things in her career, and this was exceptional. And I hope that she gets some Oscar nominations for it. I think she's 100% deserving. Ariana Grande was incredibly special in this movie, and I was kind of uncertain at first what her performance was going to be like because I'm not super familiar with her. I know that she's an incredibly popular musician. I know she was on Nickelodeon for a while, but like seeing her in something of this caliber, I didn't know what to expect, and she is absolutely incredible. Probably one of the best performances I've seen all year long. It takes a lot to step in the shoes of Kristen Chenoweth, what she gave to that performance in the original iteration of Wicked, and she nails it perfectly, but while doing her own thing with it. There are enough of the mannerisms and the vocal inflections that are reminiscent of what makes the character so special, but I feel like Ariana adds so many different things to the character that kind of brings her own interpretation to it, and it was just really special to watch. I was honestly kind of blown away at just everything that she brought to the screen. She's whimsical, she's funny, I love her dialogue delivery. I just think she is perfect for this role, and really after watching this, I couldn't see anyone else doing it this amount of justice. And I think the chemistry that she has with Cynthia Erivo on screen, they just fit really well together, and I think making that work for the musical, the relationship between those two characters, it's so incredibly important to get the overall message of the film across. And if you cast it incorrectly, it's not going to work. And I was just so incredibly impressed with those two performers, and I think they're amazing. And there are a ton of actors and actresses in this. I could go through and pick out each and every one, even like Peter Dinklage and the song that he sings in this movie, incredible. Michelle Yeoh was great. Jeff Goldblum, like everyone that shows up in this movie is really fantastic. As far as like the production and set design, I love how lived in the world feels. There's so many cool little attention to detail. I love even like the train that takes them to Oz, and like all the mechanical gears and the inner workings, thinking about who Oz is. And then when we get to the Emerald City, there's so much great attention to detail. I love the look of Shiz University. It's really cool. There's this scene when they do Dancing Through Life that there's these like revolving bookcases. It's just a really neat world, and I think the director was able to have fun with the production design team and just creating this world that feels very whimsical and magical, and it's easy to completely and totally immerse yourself into it. I loved the musical numbers in this. I think choreography is so incredibly important, and I talked about Les Mis. In that movie, what's interesting about it is there's not a ton of choreography, but it's such a personal musical that there's so much about it that's up close and personal, which I think is important to the overall punch of that particular product. But there's a lot of choreographed dancing with a ton of actors and actresses, and I think they really nail it. I mean, it looks really good. It feels like an iteration of the stage musical brought to screen, which is all you can hope for. And I loved the way that these songs were performed. They were done in a way that was just paying homage to the original and doing it where it was incredibly tasteful, and it really landed. And I could see myself, I listened to the original soundtrack quite a bit, but I will probably be listening to this for quite some time because of how much I loved it. And I think the most important part of Wicked, like I said at the beginning, is just the amount of beautiful messaging in the movie that feels so incredibly poignant to the times that we're living in now. Like whether it's Elphaba's character and the intense amount of hate and scrutiny that she gets solely for being herself and looking different. And I think that that's so true to what so many marginalized groups experience, or what we see in the LGBTQ community and the way people are ostracized just for embracing who they are as people. And that reigns true to when Elphaba learns about her powers and how people want her to be a specific way, but she just wants to be true to who she is. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that. There's the whole segment about animals and how animals in this world, they can talk and they're a part of society, but society no longer wants them to be able to speak, and they want to put them in cages. And obviously you can look at that as a direct reflection of the way human beings treat animals, but also if you want to parallel it to the experience of marginalized individuals and how they are silenced just for speaking out. And I think it's really interesting when you look at Dr. Dillamond's character, played by Peter Dinklage in this, who gives a really incredible speech at the beginning of the movie in class talking about history and how certain people don't want you to listen to history, but the importance of viewing history and learning from that experience, and just how pertinent that is to the day-to-day society we live in, and how it seems like people don't learn from the mistakes of history, and how we keep putting ourselves back into the same situations over and over and over again. And I think that resonates in an incredibly beautiful way in this movie and hits very hard emotionally. There's a beauty in the power of friendship in this. There's an interesting message about government and just control of powerful entities, and forcing a common enemy to try to like keep control and hold over people. And there's just so much you can unpack in this musical. And obviously this is only part of the product. This ends essentially where Act 1 of the musical finishes. And I've seen some complaints that people have said, like, you know, oh, it's too long or it overstays its welcome. But I was completely and totally immersed for the entire almost 3-hour runtime. I didn't think it was boring. I thought that it was completely and totally immersive. The songs were amazing. And I'm not sure what you can complain about because it's just so well done. If I have any minor complaints, some of the cinematography and the color grading and the lighting is just a little bit dull. I think there are some moments, for instance, when Elphaba singing The Wizard and I at the beginning, she kind of runs into this field that kind of cross sections with the desert, and it's very bland looking. The color palette is really muted, and I feel like they could have saturated the color palette a little bit more to kind of accompany the hopefulness and the desire that she has for the future. The scene dancing through life when they're performing that, I love the setting in that library, but the lighting, it's definitely very overexposed in moments where you're getting like lens flares on screen. And I just feel like if there was more attention to detail to the technical side, a lot more people would see this as perfect. But honestly, I was so swept away in the performances and the overall production design and the messaging of it that I can excuse those little bits of things because they're not so glaringly awful that they take away from the experience. It's just, as someone who loves film and pays attention to those little things, I could see them being tweaked a little bit. But I am so excited for part 2. I can't wait to see if they nail Act 2. I'm sure they 100% will. But this is just an amazing movie going experience, and if you still haven't seen it yet, please go watch it at the theater because it's incredible. So have you seen Wicked? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this was amazing. Easily one of my favorite movies of the year. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.